Well, it's funny that Jan talks about that day 22 years ago because you know Jan better than I do today. But what I think you will recognize is that for this morning, we were briefed about, I don't know, 3 months ago, we were given a strategic brief on this is roughly your role in the program and what you need to do. And about a month ago, there was a much more detailed brief. This is the detailed flow of the events, and this is where you fit in, and here are key themes you need to address. And then last week, we spoke to the business leaders and got very detailed briefings. And then this morning, Jan said, remember that talk 22 years ago? Just tell him what I told you then. Am I wrong? So it's very special to be here. I always, you think about where you are in the program, and you said, and I think you were being very kind, that everybody looked like they'd slept very well. My impression, as I was standing by the front door, was a lot of people coming through the door like this. I was like, great, and I'm supposed to wake you up. Rob and I came over from New York 2 days ago. We were in London yesterday, and just on a personal note, before I jump into the content, when you're a Dutchman abroad, and I'm very much a Dutchman abroad, there are a few things that make you very proud of your country. And when you talk about dairy, it gets right to the heart of it. And when I see the brands and the products that you have worldwide, that I encounter as I travel the world, we have offices everywhere, and everywhere I go, you see these products, you see these brands, and it makes you think like that, makes you proud. So it's very nice to be here, very good. Now, why we're here, and the area, of, if you like, that we'd like to talk about, I'm going to start my timer because it's one of those challenges, is indeed, as Jan mentioned, that there are lots of things happening that cause brands, cause organizations to think about being more global, to think about collaborating more closely across borders and leveraging their scale. And that's a topic of focus that EffectiveBrands has made its sole expertise over the last decade. And we've studied it quite closely by working with a lot of big organizations. So I'll try and leverage some of that into the sort of topics that we review. But also, we've studied it very closely as part of a larger project that is called the Leading Global Brands work. And I wanted to just share some of the key findings. The first reason, and when I see your mood video and I hear the program for yesterday, I don't think I need to spend a lot of time on the reason for actually even thinking about this. Standing still and thinking, why do we need to do this? So many marketeers today, for the first time, are suddenly confronted with the fact that they're either working for or competing against a global brand. And that actually, just 10 years ago, if you look at your own experience, I'm sure it's true as well, was very different. It is now almost impossible to not think about competing against global brands and to compete against organizations. And when I say brand, I don't mean a product that has exactly the same name, looks exactly the same in every country. I mean a concept, a product that behind it strategically, perhaps supply chain-wise, perhaps just concept-wise in terms of positioning, has a harmonized mix, has strategic thinking that goes across borders, that has a great idea at its source, and we'll talk more about this later, actually has often a universal insight, something very innate to humans behind it, that has been used as a proposition, that somebody has said, hang on, this need is not unique to my country. This need is a human need, and in fact, our brand can deliver a solution against that, and we may have to change the name in some countries. We may have to change exactly how we talk about it in some countries. But as a concept, as a proposition, it is actually a well-defined and quite harmonized, great idea. Because if you have a few great ideas, you're a very lucky marketing organization. So I'm going to quickly cover some of the leading global brands learning, and then we're going to structure our discussion around what does it take for big brands to be successful. Again, not necessarily with the same name. We'll go right into that. And then, perhaps most importantly for today, how do you run those most effectively? What does it take in an organization as a leader, doesn't matter whether you're in marketing, sales, or R&D, what does it take to make that work within such a new organization? And that may be relevant for you. So first, some very quick findings. We started EffectiveBrands about 10 years ago, and as I said, the topic was really, hang on, we see this happening more and more, and there really isn't a book to read about how do you do this well. How do you do this well? there isn't a council to join, and there wasn't sort of any kind of body of knowledge that you could really build on and benchmark how you're doing. So we started it 9 years ago. It's called the Leading Global Brands Project. And we knew we were onto something when within a quarter, 5 big global brands had said to us, hang on, we heard about this, can we be part of the study? And actually, within a year, it was 25 big global brands. And basically what we said to the leaders of these companies and these brands was, be honest to us about what you find going well and what you find really challenging. We won't share your secrets. We won't tell anybody that you know, Heineken is having problems with so-and-so. But what we will do is we'll look for the generalized learning. What does everybody seem to do well? What does everybody say, I wish I'd done that on day one? Or I wish I'd never done that. And that's what this has turned out to be. Now, over the years, we've added quant. So whenever we do any project anywhere, we do a quant study, and every marketer, every salesperson, every R&D person that works with marketing gets a questionnaire, and that by now is over 21,000 people worldwide that have contributed to some of these findings. So, key themes. Yesterday was about outside, so I'm not going to belabor this point, but the world is flattening at a high pace. And the only interesting thing to say here is that often the marketing and sales disciplines say, well, our sister disciplines seem to be doing this a little faster than we are. And that's challenging because they in supply chain or in finance seem to be completely international and we're not yet. So we feel like we're a step behind. We feel that we're catching up to do that. On the other hand, if you look outside, the push to do that faster is huge. Now, you know, we're never going to argue that there's going to be one global consumer. Your mood video didn't say that either. But when you look at segments, like for example, youth, we did a big study for Calvin Klein a few years ago, and it's interesting, youth, I always thought sort of ended at 24. Well, it actually turns out the official definition of youth now ends at 37. Makes me feel good. Now, the reason why, and I hope there's no Italians in the room because I will make enemies on the spot, is that that is the average age, not the maximum age, it's the average age that an Italian man leaves home. I'm not kidding. It's true. And the Italians will talk about it a little bit more. So youth, when you look at it as a segment, many of our clients are saying, look, it's true. People are very, very different culturally and in their behaviors. But actually, when you start looking at segments, there are major forces that are everywhere. Women entering the workforce. The way that youth are exposed to media and basically if you look at their habits and behaviors, a Chinese youth in Shanghai actually has a lot more in common with their counterpart in New York, Paris and Milan than they do with their uncle and auntie that live 2 hours outside Shanghai. That's how quickly things are flattening in the outside world. Looking at the similarities among our consumers is a very interesting and very fast-moving target. So organizations are trying to respond. Organizations are moving more quickly to address this and to work better internationally across marketing and sales. So the interesting thing is, of course, how well are they doing this? So this is some of the quant findings. The first thing is, are your brands globally, are the global brand part of your organization, are they becoming more important to the strategic future of the company? And as you can see, a vast majority of the companies in our benchmark say, yes, they are. The second question is, okay, you have these global brands or internationalizing brands. Are they being controlled more consistently? In other words, is the leadership consistent? And also here, you see that a vast majority of companies are saying, yes, we're not just creating brands and letting everybody do with them whatever they want. We're really strategically working across these categories or across brands, more organized in a consistent manner. So the big question is, how well is it going? If everybody's doing this, how well is it going? Well, that's very interesting. If you say, and you know, if you think about it, leveraging your scale when you compete with a small local competitor is a key success factor. Otherwise, why are you doing it? So how well are you doing that? Well, actually, a vast minority of companies say we do that well. That's something that we're really struggling with. One of the advisors of our company is the former CMO of Unilever. He likes to describe this as the sort of gay teenage effect, in the sense that at some point you suddenly realize you're not the only person that feels like this. A lot of global organizations and a lot of marketers and sales in organizations going, oh, we're not the only company that's having trouble doing this. And so, I mean, I think the litmus test is, once you get something right, how good are you at rolling it out quickly? I mean, if you've got it right, surely then you owe it to yourself to try it quickly in other places. And how good are you at that? Well, on average, as you can see, a lot of organizations say, actually, we're not that good at it. We're trying to get better, but it's very difficult. So what are some of those key challenges? Well, the first is really a mindset challenge. And I wanted to throw it right out there, because if you didn't have this discussion going on, you'd be very different to every other organization we've looked at. The logic is somehow that if you are leveraging your global scale and you're centralizing, you may be very efficient, but what you'll never be is highly effective. It's a construct that some people have made up, and it's one that's often used to block productive collaboration across global organizations, to say, no, 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 if we do that, we can't be effective. And it's a false choice. These are not two ends of the spectrum. In fact, in today's world, when your competitors are globalizing and leveraging their scale, what they are doing is they're driving efficiencies that you can't afford not to do. But what we're also seeing is that there are significant organizations out there that are really boosting their effectiveness and getting bigger, better ideas out there, faster. And it isn't either or, it's and. Yes, you need to increase the efficiency, but you also have the opportunity. That's the big chance that I think we're talking about here today, to increase the effectiveness of what you're doing, to actually do better and bigger things because you're leveraging your expertise, because you are pooling your resources. And that's what this is about. So what keeps some of these leaders awake? Well, you had your video, and I'm not going to recap it in a few slides. But the fact that consumers are now indeed controlling the conversation makes a lot of marketing and salespeople feel uncomfortable, particularly the leaders. One of them said, you know, I'm the expert, I've done this 25 years. I used to feel like marketing was like bowling, like sales promotions and planning with my retailers was like bowling. I could see the pins, I was trained, I had the ball, and I knew that if I gave it the right spin, roughly how many pins I would hit. Now, with this social media and new dynamics and grey imports, it feels much more like a pinball machine. I hit the button, and I just pray to God that the ball hits something along the way that I find important, and that it doesn't hit the things I don't want to hit. That sense of no longer understanding exactly which levers we were trained to do, and knowing which ones does what. And all these new levers, how they fit in. It's something that a lot of global marketers, and I'm sorry, I thought I switched this off. It actually says your phone will shut down, yes. Differentiation. As things flatten, competitors are looking at ideas all the time. They're seeing everything immediately, and we don't have the time to sort of, you know, develop this idea slowly and then see if it works or not. And what you see, I mean, I'll use an example in electronics. How many of you know the brand HTC? Okay. How many of you knew this brand 5 years ago? 1, 2. And this is my point. HTC, 3 years ago, was paying phone providers to put their logo on the back of phones to create some brand familiarity. Now what they've done is they've just hired some of the best marketers in the world. They're for sale. Yeah? And said, hey, we want to build a brand. Think of Samsung. 10 years ago, it wasn't really a brand you wanted to be seen with. LG, Gold Star, Lucky Gold Star is what it stood for. Now it's a brand you're proud of. So this is a brand that doesn't really have a strong brand equity yet, I think. But they have the most advanced phones in market worldwide in the US, with a 4G, big screen, faster than an iPhone phone. Now the branding's not there yet, they haven't figured it out yet, but they're catching up so quickly that the providers of, you know, wherever they are in the world, they don't have your legacy systems, they move quickly. And in fact, some of our friends, you know, the retailers, Jan, I need to tell you nothing about this, they've looked at us and said, hey, we can play that game, we can build brands. Private label market shares were mentioned in your video. You know, in England, there are brands that are seen as far more superior than the brands any of us could make, and they're retail brands. It's not like we can expect them to be waiting for us. They're moving very, very fast. And what we see particularly leading to frustration is that within these organizations, as you go international, as multiple teams think about the same brands, the frustrations start happening around who does what. Hey, hang on, that's what I'm supposed to be doing. And that the role responsibility clarity is something that big companies have a real challenge around. So that leads often to a lack of external focus. And this is where it really gets dangerous. Because it's a little bit like, the people in the old days on the east coast of America, they moved towards the west and they created towns. And then the town would have its first lawyer, and the lawyer had nothing to do. And then the second lawyer arrived. And suddenly there were lawsuits up and down. It's like fax machines. If you have one, it's useless. You need two to communicate. It's the same with marketing teams. Somehow, if there's another team thinking about the same brand somewhere else, regional or at HQ, I'm going to spend some of my attention on, are they doing a good job? Are their ideas good enough? And suddenly there's a focus completely internally rather than how are we beating this retailer? How are we beating this competitor? How are we working with this retailer? The attention span starts to differ. And it's an enormous challenge to the global organizations we study to keep that attention focused outside where it should be, not inside. And as expertise gets developed, there's a real challenge to say, okay, we figured this out somewhere. It works. Now, how do we roll it out quickly? What you see far too often are that there are these pockets of expertise. I'm sure you have it in your company too, that you know the Thai are particularly good at this type of marketing. Well, are we taking that learning and are we applying it in all the other markets where that type of marketing is actually very useful to understand? And it may not be in Asia, it may actually be in the south of Germany. Are we thinking about where have we learned what? Or sometimes more importantly, where have we failed dramatically and we don't want to repeat the mistake? These disconnected pockets are a real issue. So what does it take to succeed? Because that's what we're here about, not to get worried about the challenges, but to then turn on to that and say, what does it take to win? Well, as we look at all those brands and look at the ones that float to the top, as they go global, as they internationalize, how do they work effectively? It really takes two things, and we wanted to cover both today. The first is what we call the what, the characteristics of the best global brands, of the winning ones. And there's three things that Rob will go into in great detail that every one of those brands seems to demonstrate. And today is a lot, and a lot of the preparation talks were about, okay, we've put the strategies in place, we've put the organization in place, and now we need to get on with it. That's a big theme that seems to be relevant to you. Yes, but at the same time, the ideas that need to come through those new channels need to be bloody brilliant. If you use a great machine and put bad stuff into it, it's going to come out, in many places, as bad stuff. So the challenge here is, and the challenge up and down within the organization needs to be, yes, categories, you've now got this responsibility for developing these concepts, and you've got great strategies. Now, give us the great ideas, and many will be there, and many are coming down the line. But it is such a responsibility as a category, once you have that responsibility, to develop really good concepts. So, the what, there's some real things that we've learned there. The first is that these brands that travel always ladder up to what we would call a universal insight. It's something that we could test right here, right now. It's something that's very, very human. It doesn't need a lot of words. We understand it because we are human. And it's about things like motherhood or success. And we're going to see some great examples. The second is that those brands stand for more than making just money. They are purposeful. They are trying to do the right thing in the area where it's relevant. And the third is that they think like experiences. They don't think just product. They think about how do I deliver these solutions to my consumers in every which way that's relevant. So that's the what. But if you go internationally, if you develop your organization into something that actually becomes a powerhouse of brands that travel, you need a second thing. Everyone in the organization needs to be thinking about the how as well. How do we make sure that we connect across all the disciplines and across the countries? That we connect between categories and opcos, that we inspire all the people that can make or break our brand, and that we then have complete focus on what it is that that inspiration should be focused on. What are the three things we're trying to get done this year? Once you know what it is, how clear is it that I know what I need to do, and I know where it starts, and I know where it stops, and there's no ambivalence around the pieces on the edges. I know who picks up the work from me. I know who does the work before me. And finally, build. How do I get the information and the tools and the checklists and the ideas that make me successful? And if I have those ideas, how do I get them into the hands and the heads of the people that need to know that information? That's what we call the what, and we're very, very honored to have Rob Malcolm here today. So I mentioned that it takes not just the what and the how, it takes both. And as we studied these global marketing leaders, a few float to the top as really being great at both. There are fantastic chief marketing officers in the world that I've worked with closely, that I've studied closely, that are real ideas people. I think we've all met them. But somehow, that's what they stay, ideas. And either they have great people around them that run with it, or they don't, and those ideas stay in one place. Then there are some people that are just brilliant operators and get efficient machines going, and there are a few. We call them global marketing CEOs, because actually that's the mindset they have. They don't just do marketing, they think sales, they think innovation. And that's why Rob Malcolm was featured in our book as one of the predominant leaders in this. One of the people that really got this right. You know, foundation at Procter & Gamble, you know, as an ex-Unilever person, I will excuse him that's okay. But some people say it's a good marketing school. I tend to agree. But then at Diageo, I don't know if you know the story of Diageo, but literally Diageo went from being lots of little brands all around the world to a powerhouse, the #1 drinks company, with all the big brands you know, from Johnnie Walker to the vodkas to the coffee drinks. All the big brands are Diageo. And the way they do marketing is now generally recognized as being one of the top 3 in the world. So it's fantastic that you made the time to come over, Rob. Please tell us a little bit more about the what.